Alright, so here's the thing. If you're standing in front of the gaming store or scrolling through your digital library right now, trying to figure out whether you should jump into Borderlands 3 or give Tiny Tina's Wonderlands a shot, we need to talk about this. Because these two games, they're actually way more different than people think, even though they're basically the same DNA, you know? I'm going to break down everything you need to know. The combat, the story, the characters, how long you're actually going to be playing, and whether you should go full Vault Hunter on Pandora or roll up into a fantasy campaign as a Dungeon Master's fever dream. Let's get into it.
Let's start with what they both do right. They're both first-person shooters with RPG elements, wrapped in this insane loot system. Like you're getting thousands upon thousands of weapon variations, and not dopamine hit of finding legendary gear. It's real in both games. Borderlands 3 came out in 2019, and it was built on everything the franchise had perfected. You've got your 4 Vault Hunters, Amara with her ethereal fists, Mose with her massive Iron Bear mech, Zane with his Gajax, and FLR4K with creatures that fight alongside you. Each character has 3 unique action skills, which is a massive upgrade from previous games. It means your build options are basically insane. The combat in Borderlands 3 feels snappy, like really snappy. Shooting is fluid, critical hits matter because they absolutely wreck things, and the gunplay is just chef's kiss, you know? You're sliding around, throwing grenades while firing, and this is ragdoll physics thing where bodies actually fly through the air in satisfying ways. Yeah, there are some annoying enemy types that can one-shot you, but overall the combat is extremely satisfying. Now, Tiny Tina's Wonderlands, and this is where it gets interesting, it's got a different vibe because of its fantasy setting. You create your own character from scratch instead of picking a pre-made volunteer. You can actually make the notch class skills, which Borderlands 3 doesn't let you do. So if you want to be a Graveborn who can also cast spells, like a spell shot, go wild. Here's the big difference though. Wonderlands introduced melee weapons as an actual 5th weapon slot, and they throw back spells instead of grenades. So you're not throwing grenades anymore, you're casting spells. We're talking meteors, sheep transformation, all kinds of ridiculous stuff. It's genuinely more fun than it sounds because it lets you approach combat differently. The gunplay feels familiar because it uses the same engine, but the fantasy theme changes how weapons look and feel. Your shotguns are black powder pistols. Your rifles are fantasy themed. It's the same mechanics, but with a way more flavor.
Okay, so this is actually a huge difference, and I think it matters more than people realize. Borderlands 3's story is based on the main franchise plot. You've got the Calypso twins, Troy and Tyreen, who've started this cult, and they're hunting for vaults across multiple planets. There are returning characters from previous games, Lilith's there, Maya shows up, and it tries to tie the whole saga together. The problem is, the story's a bit of a slog, honestly. It's not bad, but it feels longer than it needs to be, and the humor doesn't always land. There's a lot of cringeworthy stuff, toilet humor, jokes that miss. When it works, it's funny, but when it doesn't, you know. The tone is very Borderlands. Edgy, violent, over the top in that specific way that's either your thing or it isn't. Tiny Tina Wonderlands, completely different approach. The entire game is literally you playing through Tiny Tina's tabletop RPG session. She's the dungeon master, you're a character called the Newbie, and you're with 2 other NPCs, Valentine and Fret, trying to stop this evil sorcerer called the Dragon Lord. But here's what makes it work. Because it's a game within the game, Tiny Tina has the freedom to change things on the fly. The narrative is about fantasy adventures, sure, but it's also about Tiny Tina dealing with her own trauma as she runs this campaign. It's genuinely touching at times, and the humor actually lands way more consistently. It's less crude, more clever, and it feels like it was written by people who actually love Dungeons and Dragons and fantasy tropes enough to parody them. The characters actually grow, and you actually care about them. So if you want a story that's more cohesive, better written, and genuinely funny, Wonderlands wins. If you want something that feels more like main series Borderlands with returning characters and franchise connection, Borderlands 3 is your pick, but just know what you're getting into.
Character building is where these games diverge pretty significantly. Borderlands 3, you pick your Vault Hunter and you're locked into their skill tree. Amara's always going to be a Siren, FL4's always going to be a Beastmaster. You can spec into different skills and create vastly different builds, but you can't fundamentally change what your character is. You also get weapon skins, character skins, tons of cosmetic customization for your appearance. Your character looks and feels like their character. Tiny Tina's Wonderlands flips this. You create your character from the ground up. You choose your appearance, your voice, everything. And then you pick classes. But here's the magic part. You can mix classes. Like legally combine two different class abilities into one character. That level of flexibility is something Borderlands 3 doesn't touch. It's genuinely more like playing an actual RPG where you're building your own hero. The trade-off is that Tiny Tina's Wonderlands has fewer weapon skins and cosmetic options. It strips some of that customization back, probably because the fantasy setting has its own aesthetic that works differently. But for actual gameplay customization, Wonderlands gives you more freedom to create the exact character you want.
Okay, so visually, both of these games are based on Gearbox's art style. It's that cel-shaded look that's held up surprisingly well over the years. When Borderlands 3 came out, the graphics were genuinely impressive. The environments are huge, they're detailed, and they look great. The creature design is awesome, and running around to multiple planets keeps games visually diverse. Tiny Tina's Wonderlands uses that same engine, but it leans hard into fantasy aesthetics. You've got castles, dragons, goblins, all the classic fantasy stuff, but with guns. It's not trying to be cutting edge visually, it's just trying to be charming. And it works. The visual style actually fits the tabletop RPG vibe really well. It feels less serious, more playful, and that's kind of the point. Borderlands 3 feels like a sci-fi action movie. Wonderlands feels like you're inside a Dungeons & Dragons campaign someone's running, and honestly, both approaches work for what they're trying to do. Borderlands 3 is more ambitious visually, but Wonderlands is more cohesive aesthetically.
Both games support up to 4-player co-op, but Tiny Tina's Wonderlands did something Borderlands 3 didn't fully support: full crossplay. You could play with friends on any platform. PC, Xbox, PlayStation, doesn't matter. That was a big deal because Borderlands 3 had some platform limitations. Both have local split screen options, though Wonderlands supports 4-player split screen on current gen consoles, while last gen is limited to 2 players. That's nice if you got a squad sitting on your couch. They also both have loot options for multiplayer. You can play cooperatively, where everyone gets their own loot, or competitively, where it's a scramble for gear. Wonderlands calls this cooperation versus competition, which is honestly a perfect name for it.
So which one should you actually play? Here's the real talk. Pick Borderlands 3 if you want a big, ambitious sci-fi shooter with a massive endgame, tons of legendary weapons to farm, and you don't mind a story that's hit or miss. If you're the type who loves grinding for perfect gear rolls and trying dozens of different builds, this is your game. Pick Tiny Tina's Wonderlands if you want something more focused, better written, genuinely funny, and you're not trying to sink 100 hours into endgame farming. It's the perfect game if you want a complete, satisfying adventure in a reasonable time frame. Honestly, if you can play both, do it. They're different enough that they're not competing for the same space in your head. But if you can only grab one, think about what you want. Long grind or focused story? Sci-fi or fantasy? That's basically your answer right there. Thanks for watching, and let me know down in the comments which one you're going to pick up. See you next time.